Lord have mercy. Why is doing lives so complicated? For those of you who do this on the fly all the time, you guys are it because cheese is just so much. So, is it working? I don't know. Hi, friends! Can anyone see me? Are we alive? Am I here? Can you see my face? Maybe not, but I hope everyone is having an amazing day. Today is Wednesday, September 10th. And welcome to Let's Get Real. So, I kind of popped into this, so we were doing lives in a few different locations. But if you're here and you have questions, make sure you drop those questions below. So, I was giving some input on our lights, and so these are going to be newer. That is the brand, and then they are going to be stand lights, which I have linked in our shop profile. So, we're going to get back. So, today's episode on Let's Get Real is we're going to be talking about what to actually expect once you're engaged. So you've gotten engaged, you're thinking about let's talk and let's do this wedding and what steps do I take and do all of that. So let's talk about the first thing you should do. First things first, if you haven't started already, is a guest list. And why the guest list is important because that's going to help you to decide on how large of a venue space you might need. Of course, there's things like eloping, which is just the two of you. Sometimes people take family. Other times, it could be something really big, anywhere from, I would say an average wedding these days is about 150 people. We also see very large events from anywhere from 250 to 500, and then I've seen some more than that. So it really depends on biggest things are budget, and then of course, like where you're getting married. So generally, budget's a good, guest list is a good place to start, so that way we can help find you the perfect venue or location, or if you're going to be doing land and all of that kind of thing. Some people are really lucky and they do have that option to kind of get married on their own land or maybe family friendly options, or just of that sort. So that would be my first recommendation, is creating that guest list and going from there. The next thing you're going to want to talk about is budget, and this is big because, sorry friends on my TikTok. So budget is big because when you're thinking of budget, you're going to want to think of the big things like the venue, of course. So this is the space. This is then the next thing you're going to want to talk about is food. So the caterer, what type of food? Mexican, barbecue, Italian, whatever it may be. Then you're going to want to talk about the DJ, because if you want music, if you want that environment, you're probably going to want a really good DJ. Then you're going to talk about photo, at the very least, a good photographer. Now, photographers are hard, and always, always, always do your research on any and every vendor. Make sure you're vetting them, making sure like you're checking their website and their reviews, and just, check to see Instagram, check to see what they're posting. Do they have a legit website? All that kind of little thing is for photo and video for sure. I would say that these are probably the biggest scam vendors, unfortunately. So just make sure you're looking into those. And getting really well vetted information, because you don't want to be spending thousands on something and then in the long run you kind of get left in the dust in the dark. Then you're going to also need hair and makeup, unless you're super talented and you're going to do it yourself. Other things you're going to need, of course, you're going to need the officiants, unless you're going to use someone like a family friend or a grandparent that's going to get the two of you married. And then of course you're going to need a coordinator, which would be me. Just kidding. But no, really, if you really are looking for a coordinator, look to chat. But on the long run, you're going to need decor, probably linens. And then if you're going to be looking at things like favors, and then of course the honeymoon, because who wants to go through full wedding planning and then not be able to actually go on a honeymoon? You're going to be so sad. And even just to get away for a weekend, it doesn't have to be anything big like going out of state, going out of country. You can literally just hop down from where you are and go to Fredericksburg, San Antonio, Austin, whatever it may be, just to get away for a little bit and recuperate and like celebrate just the two of you in that space. So highly recommend something small of the sort at least. So we're gonna go back. So we've talked about things, and then of course, before I move on, don't forget you need the dress and the tux, right? So that includes in your budget as well. If you're looking for a good budget planner, We have a really good Excel sheet that we can share with you. So just send me a DM if you need that information, and I can send that to you. So that way you can kind of use it as a guideline. It's great. It's literally, you can input numbers and it'll help you kind of stay on track. It's an amazing budget tracker form, which I love, and I am totally cool with sharing with anyone who needs that help. So you have gotten the scoop. What to expect, what you'll probably need to budget for. Of course, there's lots of DIY brides out there, which I give full props to. So DIY brides is usually something, it's a do-it-yourself bride or a do-it-yourself couple. And so generally these couples, they love to do like their own arrangements. They love to like bake their own cakes. They love to like do their own planning. Amazing. It's all a great thing to do. But in the long run and on the day of your event, I promise you, you're not going to want to be doing all the running around all by yourself. So at the very least, make sure you're grabbing yourself a day of coordinator. So that way, the day of the event, you can sit back, you can relax, you can enjoy, and have an amazing wedding day. You don't want to be watching the clock. You don't want to make sure the DJ got there. You don't want to make sure all the decor got set up right. You want to be sitting in your room, having a good time with your girls, with your guys, with your whoever that's involved in the wedding day, and you want, you know, someone else taking that role. You don't want to be doing it, I promise. So at the very least, a day of coordinator that's going to do all of that for you. But the biggest cost of expense generally will come from the venue, which is the space, right, of where you're going to get married. So some people elect to do things very traditional. So they'll get married like in a church. You still have to pay for this if you weren't not aware, especially for Catholic ceremonies. You're going to have to pay there's fees, and every church is a little different. So make sure you reach out to your church and get that information from them. If you elect to only do a venue option and do ceremony and reception on site at the same location, generally that's easier on guests, it's easier on you, it's less transportation, it's less driving, and so I would say that's probably a little bit of the more non-traditional route, but it's where most couples are going in this day and age. So let's say you found a venue and you love it, and I'm just going to throw a venue out there that that I'm out regularly, and I have their current pricing because if you know me, I'm a very transparent person, and so venues are expensive, but also in today's day and age, a lot of venues are coming. I'm loving all these little heart things. I love it. Thank you guys, hearts. So if you are unaware of the cost of a venue, please, please, please reach out and check that out first is the biggest thing. I've seen venues range anywhere from $4,000 for a day to upwards of $16,000 for a day, and that's just the venue. And then I've seen where a lot of venues are starting to move into all-inclusive packages. Hey guys that are just joining, hey Judy, welcome on in. So for those of you who are considering a venue and looking at places, make sure you're looking into the venue and seeing what exactly are they including for that cost. Is it just the venue? Is it the tables, the chairs? How long is the venue rental? Is it 12 or is it 14 hours? I promise that's going to make a super big difference, 12 to 14 hours. It's going to do a lot with your setup time. It's going to do a lot with like hair and makeup. What time can you arrive to get dressed, and all that kind of business. So you decided you wanted to do a venue who is completely DIY. So all they're doing is giving you the space, the tables, the chairs. Now you've got to find all of the other vendors. DJ, food, security, usually bar, and most of the time venues will have their own security and their bartenders, so those are usually the ones that are on site through them. Now, all of the other vendors, like I mentioned, you can find your own, which is great because that allows you to control more of your budget. Now, some of our venues, as we mentioned, that are moving to the more all-inclusive route, so maybe they are including the catering, or maybe they're including the linens and the DJ and the photo booth and the officiant. Yes, they're including it all, but what is the cost? And if you broke it down, is it more or less than it would be at a DIY venue? So that's what I would look at when you're trying to say, I'm trying to control my budget and where I am with wedding planning. So I think that's the biggest thing when you're considering budget. What to consider is like a max cap, like maybe you don't want to go over 20,000 for 150 people, or if you're, I don't want to go over 5,000 for 100 people. Something like that's going to be a little bit harder, especially with a venue that's not all inclusive, that only the space is $4,000, right? So now we're in a very tight space. Maybe you're going to be potlucking it. Maybe a family friend is offering to do a cake. Maybe they're offering to do photos. Yes, there's lots of ways around making the budget work for you, but just make sure that you do that research when you're finding that venue. Because there are some amazing ones out there, and then there are some, like I mentioned, that everything now is starting to work within house. So if you are sold on a venue where you have to use their vendors, just make sure you're looking at what's included, which vendors they're including, and if there's any buyout fees. So there are lots of venues now that, especially for food, if you don't want to use their caterer, you have to pay a buyout fee. And a lot of those buyout fees are anywhere from $500 to $2,000 on the high end, which if you're considering, food alone, I've seen anywhere from $18 per person to a high end of $45 per person. And of course, that depends on the caterer. If you're wanting a buffet versus plated service, plated will always be more because it requires more staff. Keep that in mind as well. So those are things to consider when you're looking at venues. Let's talk questions to ask venues whenever you're going and touring. What's included? How long is my rental? Do my vendors need insurance? Which your vendor should have insurance, because should something go wrong on the day of your wedding, you do not want to be liable for your vendors. Now, outside of insurance, make sure you're getting, as a couple, you're getting wedding insurance, because if anything were to happen, you, like I mentioned, you don't want to be liable for anyone, because you just don't. Weddings are expensive. Wedding insurance is great to have. You can get quotes for that, and I've seen them pretty cheap, anywhere from $100 to $200, for $1 million policy, which, why not? If anything happens, if somebody canceled and now you can't get a hold of them, they've taken their money and they've run. You see it with photographers. Sometimes you see it with coordinators, some of the ones who have gotten into the business and now they've kind of flopped and they're just gone and they've taken your money. Wedding insurance is a big, big deal. So you can get it through, there's actually like wedding sites that you can go. It's called WedSafe. And then of course you can always look through like your car insurance rep or whoever it may be. If you need, again, that link, let me know and I can send it to you. Or if you want to contact one of our people that I use for all of those quotes, I can send that to you as well. I'm kind of just going to take a break and go through and see if anyone has any comments, questions, concerns of anything that I've talked about. I love seeing people have joined. Thank you for those who are still chatting with me. Feel free to drop any of those questions, like I said, because, we're just all here to learn and I want to chat. Oops, sorry, cut my face off over here. And we're kind of just here to kind of chat and learn and listen and talk weddings, because that's what I love. And so that's what we're doing. I don't see any questions, so hey friends that are joining, don't forget to go up into that besties box and follow people that are in here, and I'm gonna do the same. So anyone that's flopped by, ropped by, tossed by, shared, don't forget to share with our friends. I'm gonna go and then we're gonna all be besties after this. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next topic. So we've chatted a little bit about what to go for, what to consider in your budget, what questions to ask when you're visiting a venue. Now let's talk about just in general what to expect. So I kind of touched on venues and prices, and not to sticker shock people what to expect on that end, because I think when people are considering weddings, they are sticker shocked for one, and then it's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it's a hey Tina, I can see your cookies. I don't know what that is, I've never seen it, but yeah, so I just wanted to, that was funny, just kind of popped up. So anyways, so make sure you are doing your due diligence when you're doing all of the research. Vet everyone, all of your vendors, checking out for them. How long have they been in business? Like I mentioned earlier, do they have a wedding website? Do they have an Instagram? Have you seen their portfolio? Do they have insurance? Because that should be a red flag. Even someone starting out a business needs to have insurance because they don't want to be liable for something else that happens. Um, have they worked at the particular venue maybe that you're interested in? Of course, there's new venues popping out left and right, so we have not been to everything in every venue. But if they haven't, then they need to be willing to meet with you at said venue for at least one kind of walkthrough introduction, because you don't want them to arrive the very day of the wedding and then not know anything about the space. Of course, sometimes they might not have the time to do that, but to each his own. I definitely always try to go and look at something beforehand if I've never been there. And that's usually when I like to do our decor meetings too, is because I like to do them in person. I think it's better to see like a complete table setup and everything like live, and rather than trying to look at videos or pictures, because different colors look differently. It could look completely different in your space. So just always do it on site. Why not? So let's talk about so we talked photo, video, food, prices, kind of things to consider. Photo and video, I feel like is a tough one to kind of gauge pricing on, because I've seen some amazing photographers who charge like $1,500 for 8 hours, and then I've seen some amazing photographers that charge like 5 to 6 thousand for that same amount of time. So I think it just depends a lot on, how long someone's been in business, how they operate their business. Are they bringing more than one person? So is it an assistant and a photographer? Is it two shooters? And please make sure that whenever you're contacting photographers, you understand the difference between an assistant and a second shooter, because I've had it happen a lot, where couples will think that since the photographer mentioned they're bringing an assistant, it means they're bringing two shooters, but a shooter is actually going to shoot your wedding. An assistant is generally someone who's there for the photographer, helping them hold extra lenses, extra cards. Maybe they're holding belongings. Maybe they're watching for like hair in the face or hair ties or something, but it's not all the same. So please double check that. So let's talk DJs. DJs is a big one. DJs have gotten to the point where they are coming in and they are setting the tone for the wedding. So you don't want to be, getting someone who maybe is going to play the whole 3-minute song and not feeling the vibe, or, reading the room. You want someone who's going to help kind of set the space and the momentum for the event to make sure everyone has a really good time. You also want to make sure the DJ is also an MC. They are not the same. They are generally, I've seen some where they are both, and I've seen some where they're two different people. So maybe one's the DJ and one's the MC. And like I said, this has a lot to do too, because someone can be a really good DJ and then they're not great at MC services. So they're not going to make announcements. They're not going to say, "Welcome to the new Mr. and Mrs." They're not going to, give the speeches, or they're not going to like know how to kind of give the environment the feel that it needs to kind of just move forward. I am not an MC, so I don't really love to take on that role. I've had to do it a few times because maybe the couple didn't have an MC, or the DJ just didn't feel comfortable, or whatever it may be. As I mentioned, that's not me. I don't love to do that job, but I can if necessary. But so make sure you're asking the DJ those questions. Do you do it? Is it extra? Is it a different person? Are you comfortable with doing it? And then, of course, make sure you always tell the DJ exactly how to say your new name, and go over and practice. And I always put it in the, the little exclamation, or what do they call the little quotations on, like, like "you neck," like that, because you don't want them saying your name wrong the day of the event. So the next thing I want to kind of bring up is favors. So favors have kind of moved away in the sense that I don't think they're necessary. I feel like if you have the extra expense like in your budget to do, you can. But I mainly see people now do things like a photo booth. So this can act as a favor at the wedding, because we can create a custom template for you, and now it's like a keepsake. You take photos and everybody loves it. It's totally fun. And then, you can text it and download it to your phone and all that. And that can serve as a favor. Of course, there's other things like, the key, the little bottle openers, there's koozies, there's the little mints, there's tissues, there's fans, there's all kinds of things as far as favors. The world is seriously your oyster in that aspect of things. But just remember, don't ever get the amount of favors that there are people. Because depending on when you're giving them out, like especially if it's like at the end of the night kind of thing, you're gonna get left with a whole bunch of favors. Or, if they're things like koozies, a lot of people put them on and they like to walk around with them and they have them all night and then they take them off and they leave them on the table. So then a lot of them end up in the trash because people forget and they're, been drinking and having such a great time that they end up tossing them in the trash can. I always say about 70 to 75% of favored totals is what I would gather if you're doing something like those. Other things I really recommend as favors are things like cookies. Most people love sweets, and they kind of go for that end. And then if we're talking on the fact of cookies, cake. Cake is becoming very non-traditional in the event industry. Everyone loves cake, but I've gotten a lot more couples lately that are saying, I just don't like cake. I don't want cake. I don't want to do it. And I think it's a teach your own kind of thing. I still think it's beautiful for photos. It's that moment that you can look back on and say, yes, we got to cut the cake. It's in our pictures. It was a great moment. And then you can always do something like a dessert bar, donuts, churros, pan dulce. You can do anything else if you don't want a very large cake. But at the very minimum, I think everyone should do something for photos. Or the other thing that's really popular right now is a champagne tower. So that could be something you also do in place of cake or with cake, and do both. Let's talk a little bit about flowers. So flowers is a huge thing when you're considering budget. I think most florists usually say about 20 to 25% is what florals should be for your overall wedding budget. So that's like, if you're budgeting $20,000 for your entire wedding, about 25% of that should be florals, especially if you're thinking real florals. Also remember that if you are considering real florals versus faux florals, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And that's just because real flowers cost more and they take a lot more I think care as a florist. They have to prep them, they have to store them, they can only do it in a so many days distance of an event. And I'm no florist, so I don't generally know the cost for that. But as I mentioned, I think usually somewhere between 20 to 25% of your total budget is what you should budget out for florals. I've also noticed that more couples are starting to move away from real and going into the silk or faux option of florals, at least for like table arrangements and things like that. So I started seeing a lot more people do a mix between real and faux just because of costs. And sometimes when couples are considering budget and things like that, they do kind of lean more towards the faux option. And the last thing I kind of want to touch about today is the honeymoon, or, just like what you're doing after the wedding. So like I mentioned, you've been planning something. Sometimes engagements are, like a year and a half, and sometimes planning is longer. So sometimes just to get away after the event and just be husband and wife, even for a couple of days, is definitely needed. So I don't think you ever need to think it needs to be like a 2-week world tour, to Europe or something like that. It doesn't have to be to Mexico. It doesn't have to be on a cruise. I think whatever fits in budget is definitely considerable, but just make sure that you do it, because I promise once you've done all the planning and you've had the wedding, you're going to want to do something and just get away for sure, just the two of you. So I think that was all the notes that I had. And kind of like I said in today's like Let's Get Real post, I just wanted to kind of touch and chat and talk weddings As we get ready to roll into the fall season, we're going to get also ready to roll into engagement season. And so it's generally, you see lots of couples that get on Facebook, or, they get on whatever it may be, and they start Googling their little hearts away, and they're like, oh, well, what does it take to plan a wedding? What kind of budget do I need? And so I think this is very good for everyone to just kind of look over and chat and just get real information, because sometimes people are not transparent with you, and they're just not going to be real with you. Other thing to really consider when you're looking at vendors and venues and just all things event, wedding, I think making sure when you inquire places, especially when you're getting on Facebook and you're saying, I'm looking for a photographer, or I'm looking for a coordinator. Things to list. When is your wedding? Where's your wedding? What is your budget for that service? Because if you just say, I'm looking for a photographer, you're going to get 9,000 comments, and you're not going to go through all those people. So the biggest way to weed out vendors and narrow down your search is to list where, when, and how much you're looking to spend. And don't do I need someone affordable, I need someone who doesn't cost an arm and a leg thing, because affordability is so different to everyone else. Like, I've seen couples who can afford to spend, $5,000-6,000 on a photographer. And then I've seen others who don't want to spend more than $1,000. They're both affordable, just different types of people, different types of, financial areas and aspects everyone has. So that would be my last big tidbit for the day. Be as kind of upfront and just straightforward as you can, so you can actually get people who respond to your needs. That way you're not having to, go through hundreds of vendors to hopefully find one person who actually worked for what you're doing. Because then the other thing you're going to do is you're going to click on everybody's website, and they're not going to have prices on them. They're going to say, please inquire to give us prices. Personally, that is a huge pet peeve of mine. I don't want to waste your time. I'm sure your time doesn't want to be wasted. So I don't understand why people can't just post their prices. But again, to each his own. You want the lead, you want to collect inquiries, that is great. But I think just in the transparency of things, everyone just needs to learn to be a little bit more upfront and real. I mean, a lot of vendors complain that they don't like, people don't get back to them, or they don't respond to them, or, so-and-so booked someone else. Well, it's probably because they were giving them real prices and real quotes, and understanding and listening to what they want, rather than trying to sell something to someone they probably didn't need. Now, as the couple side of things, the biggest thing that I would tell you is create a wedding email. Everything wedding is associated with that. So when you start reaching out to venues, vendors, people, friends, that's the first step. You don't want to be getting everything from an old email. Second step, create a postable link. This is how you're going to collect all of your addresses. You'll then be able to save and secure it in an Excel type kind of document, which is good because it'll keep everything in one spot. Then you'll go and you'll venue hunt. You'll set a budget. You'll send out save the dates. You'll create a wedding website. Then you'll start booking all of your vendors. First things after venue are generally a coordinator if you have like your heart set on a specific person. Generally you see most, especially planners, you see most wedding planners or event planners generally get booked anywhere from a year to 18 months out. So if you have someone who's specific, I would highly recommend that be one of the first people you contact, especially if you want assistance, if you're looking for more of a planner rather than a coordinator. Definitely let that be the first person you find, so that way they can help you find the venue and all of the vendors that you need. And then of course it's a photo and video, because if you have a specific style, or a specific person that you want to capture your day, they're gonna get booked quickly. Like I've seen photographers 2 to 3 years out in advance. So make sure that's kind of one of the first line of people that you contact as well. So those are my steps that I recommend you guys take when you first get engaged and you're thinking, What do I do now? So thanks for joining. Let's get real today. I appreciate it. And for those of you on my Facebook, y'all have a good day. My TikTokers, thank you for